This is the 17th season of Bass Talk Live with your hosts, Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrat. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, APCO, Ducket Fishing, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Yamagatsu, The Bass Tank, and Denali Rods. BTL coming at you. Good Wednesday, everybody. Welcome once again to another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where myself and Ken Duke are going to talk bass fishing and anything else that we want to talk about. Ken, glad to see you on the show again, man.
Glad to be here, Mark. You know how much I love Bass Talk Live and visiting with you.
Very nice. Well, I know a lot of fans out there, they just want to make sure that whatever family issues that you had, everything's going to be okay, everything's cool, you're doing well, and things are going to be okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. Yeah, as I explained to you earlier a couple of days ago, my mom, who is 90 years old, fell and broke her hip the other day. And she's going to be having surgery a little later today. And because of that, I wasn't able to be on the show yesterday. So instead, you traded up and you got Mark Mendez. So good job there. Thanks for making.
I don't know about that.
Bad.
I don't know about that, man. He's definitely not the historian that you are. But yeah, yesterday's show, great show, and we touched on a topic that we're actually going to talk about later in the show, Ken. So we'll save that for later. But as always, anytime we have you on, dude, we're going to talk the tours, we're going to talk history. We got some viewer questions. Heck, we might even take a couple of phone calls or two.
I love it. I'm ready for whatever the audience has, whatever folks have for me here. First, though, I got to start with my Mark Mendez story.
All right.
I've known Mark for a long time. Love Mark Mendez, one of my favorite people in our sport. But as you know, guys named Mark tend to be very demonstrative. They're always waving their arms around and ranting and raving and going crazy, even when maybe emotions aren't that high. So I was talking with Mark, this is, 7 or 8 years ago, at a wholesaler show in North Carolina. And we're talking, as we usually are, about something going on the tours and some this or that he wasn't particularly a fan of. And he's waving his arms around like this, and he's demonstrating to me how he talked to some guy, and he's like grabbing at my shirt and stuff like that. And I'm laughing because it's a funny story that he's telling me. And it probably goes on for 45 minutes or something. You know how Mark is. Yeah. And then I walk away and I go talk to another fella there. He looks at me and says, "Man, what is Mendez pissed at you about?" And I had to explain it. No, that's just how Mark Mendez and all people named Mark apparently.
Yeah.
Themselves.
We're kind of mellow guys, you know, those Marks. Yeah. We're very, very mellow.
Easy going. Going.
That's why I have the kind of music that I play, you know, headbanging, which begs the question. Somebody out there already has a question for you, Ken. They want to know what style, what kind of music do you listen to?
Yeah, I'm pretty eclectic on the music thing. I don't do the headbanger stuff. I don't do rap. Most anything else I'm into. Probably my favorite band of all time is REM. And a lot of that has to do with I went to the University of Georgia just as they were getting big. My law school professor was actually their lawyer and one of their partners. Huge REM fan, huge Bob Dylan fan. If you want to go way back to like high school days, I loved ELO and bands like that. But I enjoy some classical. I like some jazz. Love some blues. I like some country too. So pretty diverse. Don't do the headbanger. Don't do the rap.
Where did you go to law school at?
University of Georgia.
Okay. I don't think I knew that. Interesting.
It's not a part of my history that I'm particularly proud of. I
Huh.
haven't been a lawyer, but there you have it.
I'm sure you pass. I'm sure you passed the bar the first time. Correct?
Well, it's not easy to pass the bar, but it's not impossible either. I think what law school did for me was it certainly helped to focus me and maybe make me a little more good at critical thinking. And I think I've gained value from that.
All right. I'm looking at the questions already, man. They're
Cool.
they're diving in here. All right. Let's talk a little business first, and then we'll jump right into the questions, and then we might take some phone calls during the second half of the show. Kind of a unique or just kind of eye-opening deal was recently done when two competitors are actually doing some stuff together here. What's the scoop on that, Ken?
I assume you're talking about Pure Fishing and Rapala.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's apparently Pure Fishing is picking up a part of Rapala or Rapala USA. At least I'm not really sure all the details on this thing just yet. But Pure Fishing is the largest fishing company in the world, and of course we're all familiar with their brands from Berkeley to Hardy to Trilene Stren, Abu Garcia, on and on and on. They're a giant. They're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Fabulous company that's been around since Berkeley Bedell started tying flies when he was a teenager. And Berkeley passed away, I think, just last year or the year before at almost 100 years of age. So Pure Fishing has been around a long, long time. Rapala also been around a long, long time, at least since the 50s when Lauri Rapala started the company in Finland. A couple of really legendary operations. And there's been some shakeups at both of those companies in recent years. Over the last 10 or 12 years, Pure Fishing has gone through several ownership changes. And now they're headed up by a CEO named Harlan Kent, who comes from other industries, but he's an avid angler, avid fly fisherman in particular. And he lives here in Florida as well. I think Harlan Kent lives down in the Keys, I believe. But a good guy, smart guy, superior business guy. They're owned by like so many of the larger companies these days, owned by a private equity firm. Yeah. And these private equity firms, their goal is to make money. Not that that's not the goal of every business, but in particular, these private equity companies have a couple of characteristics. One is they're all about the bucks. That doesn't mean they're impersonal or against the industry or anything else. It just means they're looking hard at that bottom line. And two, they seldom own a property for more than, say, 4 to 6 years, kind of at the outside. So what often happens is a private equity firm will come into an industry, and they've been very busy in the fishing industry over the last 5 or 6 years. They'll come into an industry, they'll see opportunities with a company, be it Pure Fishing, Strike King, Lose, whatever. And they see an opportunity. What they're looking at is they're saying, okay, here's a company that's doing pretty well. And if we pick them up, we can do some tweak to make them even more profitable. Maybe the private equity company has other aspects of their business that's really good at marketing, that's really good at production, that's really good at distribution, that's really good at manufacturing, whatever it might be. They're going to add that to the mix of the company that they buy, and they're going to add value, and then they're going to flip that property in, say, 3 to 5, maybe 6 years.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And quite often there are some personnel changes at a company. For example, if a private equity firm picks up 2 tackle companies, maybe one makes rods and one makes reels, so there's no overlap there. But when you combine them, they don't need 2 marketing directors. They don't need 2 human resources directors. They don't need 2 whatever. And so they get rid of one person. The economy of scale there. So when you look at any transaction involving where a private equity firm is behind it, the first thing I'm thinking about is, okay, how does this fit into their master scheme? And what's the long play here? To pick up 25% of anything is interesting. And Rapala has been involved in a couple of things like that in recent years. It was only 2 or 3 years ago that Rapala bought what I understand is 49% of 13 Fishing out of Florida here.
Yeah.
And 13 Fishing is an interesting company, and a lot of people may not realize that apart from all of the bass gear and things like that is popular here in the U.S., they've got a significant European market as well. Not for bass, of course, because bass are not that widespread there, but for things like ice fishing and so forth. And just about a month ago, there were some significant changes at the top of Rapala USA. Some folks got let go. Some new folks got put in charge. A lot of folks are expecting more changes between now and ICAST with regard to personnel there. So there's a lot of stuff always going on in the fishing industry. And that's probably more true today than it was 10 years ago before private equity became such a significant part of the fishing industry.
All right, there you have it. That's good stuff. And a couple of people asked on the instant feedback, Rather Outdoors did obtain Quantum and all the Zebco brands. We actually talked a little bit about that the last time that Ken was on. So, yes, that did take place.
They did. And, I was curious about that because, Rather Outdoors has some big goals. And they're pretty systematic about what they do. They got a lot of smart people heading those efforts up. So when you see them getting Strike King, Lose, now Zebco Quantum, they're not done. They're not done. Don't be surprised. And I'm not going to comment on it here, but they're also lining things up to pick up some other brands. I think. I shouldn't say I know. I think.
Okay.
The signs are there. I'm reading the writing on the wall here.
Yeah.
The signs are there that they're in the market for another big player that everybody watching and listening is familiar with.
All right, we're going to go to a couple of the comments on the YouTube feed. Can you see that, Ken? Clay wants to know, we need a show from Ken to talk about the world record smallmouth. Why hasn't it been broken? Do you think the record is legit, or do you think that there was a strain of smallmouth in Dale Hollow that is gone?
Clay Williamson, you ask a big question, a big question. If you ask the guys around Dale, I spent a lot of time around Dale Hollow. Love that place. What a legendary fishery, legendary fish camps around there. It's a remarkable place. If you haven't been to Dale Hollow, I highly recommend it. Add that to the bucket list. The world record smallmouth caught by David Hayes on July 9th, 1955. I know it well because I've been very involved in that record, believe it or not. Though it was caught back in 1955, which is even before I was born, that record was DQ'd in 1995, disqualified by all the major record organizations at that time. And in 2005, when I was working at BASS, I said, I want to look into this situation. So I basically took a week, went up to Dale Hollow, went up to Litchfield, Kentucky, where David Lee Hayes, who caught the record fish, was living at that time. David Hayes passed away just about a year ago, by the way. He was about 95 years old. Anyway, I interviewed Hayes. I interviewed some biologists involved there, and I learned a lot about the disqualification, and I learned a lot about the record. And I wrote an article in Bassmaster magazine that appeared in the October 2005 issue, and kind of tried to flex the muscles of the bass fishing industry. And we got the record reinstated by IGFA later that year. So for a 10-year period, Hayes's fish was not the world record. Weighed 11 pounds, 15 ounces, by the way. But it has been the world record since 2005. Mark, I think this is a topic for an entire show, I hate to tell you.
Yeah, that's what he said.
This is a big one. This is a big deal. And I'm proud to have had a role in getting that record reinstated. But there's a lot going on. And there's a lot to that story. Would love to talk about it. I don't know if we have we don't have enough time between now and the end of this show.
Yeah. No, we'll do that, man. Consider that booked. We will do an entire show that is dedicated to that topic. I think the fans would. Yeah, fans would thoroughly enjoy that. So there you go, Clay. We'll get that in the books. A couple of people want to know, what is the – we'll get to that here in a minute. What is the largest smallmouth weighed in during a major competition, be it the Elite Series or Bass or MLF or the FLW Tour? Any idea, Ken?
I have no idea. Bass, in particular, has done a really poor job of maintaining its historical records.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of my time personally trying to kind of recreate a lot of those records, and I've got a lot of information that Bass doesn't have. A lot of their own records that they don't have, which is a shame. You know, it's a shame. It should be out there. MLF is obviously newer, great technology. They're able to keep that kind of information and track it better. FLW has not done the greatest job with its records. And all these organizations have kind of frustrated me with what they've kept track of, what they haven't. For example, Big Fish is kind of a pet peeve of mine. When BASS was not offering a prize for daily big fish, the tournament directors and managers just decided, well, we won't weigh them. We won't weigh them. We'll just ignore it. And if the fish isn't going to be bigger than a fish that was caught the day before, they're not even going to hit the scales. You know, you don't have to offer a check to make something of interest to your audience.
Yeah.
But, try telling them that and getting them to listen.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to throw this one up here. Yesterday, Mark and I had kind of in-depth conversation of what ifs. And it says, Brian wants to know, can Ken touch on yesterday's topic about schedules? Are the tours just stuck in their ways, or does he see a tour branching out to new water at some point?
Whoa, wow, Brian, that's a big question. Why are you guys asking me these tough questions?
Oh, come on, Ken.
Hitting on an old guy here. Okay, here's the deal, Brian. You know, everybody wants to see new water. Everybody wants to see some cool, different fishery. Here are the problems. There's a lot of infrastructure involved in one of these bigger tournaments, okay? Not only do you need a fishery of a certain size relative to the size of your field, very few big-time tournaments are held on a body of water less than 40,000 acres or so. And Mark can tell you all about this too. But it's also true that very few big tournaments are held on a body of water that doesn't have significant lodging available nearby. You don't have tournaments where the local Convention and Visitors Bureau is not going to support the tournament with some money and some cost breaks to the tournament organization. If it's a Bassmaster Open, there needs to be a Bass Pro Shops within an hour or less. You got to have the community behind it. You got to have law enforcement that's going to support it. There's a lot of infrastructure going on. Okay.
Yeah.
It's beyond just the fishery. Otherwise, we'd have all these tournaments on Falcon and be done with it. They come to Florida and be done with it. So a lot is going on. A lot has to do with the economic health of that community, whether they're willing to pay some money to get a tournament organization there, the hotel beds, the restaurants, it all comes into play. What happens is the tournament site selection people at these organizations, they also become familiar with the Convention and Visitors Bureau people in these communities that host these tournaments. They become friends. They get familiar with each other. They develop a comfort level with these people. And so you do see them coming back time after time after time to a lot of the same venues. The other thing is, really since the 60s, we haven't seen any big new waters built.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you're talking 40,000 acres plus, my memory's not great. What, Truman? maybe the last one of those.
Might be.
They're not building them because you're going to kill a snail darter, or you're going to destroy some wetlands, or they just don't need the hydroelectric power anymore.
Yeah.
So you don't have a lot of new opportunities coming in. So it winds up being the usual suspects.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to go back to the smallmouth question. Do you think it'll ever be broken, Ken?
No, not in my lifetime.
All right. Yeah, if there was a body of water out there that might produce the new record, where do you think it would be?
I think you got to say Dale Hollow, because Dale Hollow is almost the only body of water that's produced a 10-pound smallmouth. You know, there's only a couple other places. Behind Pickwick Dam has produced one. Joe Cassie has produced one. But these were decades and decades and decades ago.
Yeah.
Dale Hollow runs very cyclical. You know, it'll kick out some 8s and 9s, and then it'll kind of go quiet again, and then you'll get a few more.
Yeah.
Do I think they're different? I didn't address that earlier. Do I think there are different species of fish? Like I said, the Dale Hollow guides and people around there think it's a different species, but I've not talked to any biologists who believe that.
All right, interesting. Now, a meanmouth is a cross between a smallmouth and a spotted bass, right? Or a largemouth.
Once again, you're just killing me here, Mark. You know, the first meanmouth that I can remember, I think, was back in the 70s, and that was a cross between a largemouth and a smallmouth, and they were marking on those things because they would attack people in colorful bathing suits. They were that aggressive. They couldn't procreate, though. The hybridization was not able to procreate. Now, if you're talking about another meanmouth, I think more recently what I see in some states is a reference to a meanmouth that is apparently a cross between one of the spotted bass subspecies and a smallmouth. And several states have a state record for the meanmouth bass, but different states define meanmouth different ways.
All right. Interesting. Yeah, they're cool looking. I've caught them on Table Rock before. Very, very cool looking fish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, one of these days, Mark, I want to talk about the most important of all the bass species, which is the Florida largemouth.
Okay.
I'm going to make
We can do that.
Okay.
Speaking of that, several people have asked, do you think that the world record will fall very soon? No,
I don't. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit last time I was on.
Yeah.
I did a story for the Game and Fish West magazine not long ago where I interviewed some California biologists, and I asked them, I thought this was a no-brainer, slam dunk. They were going to say yes. I said, is there a largemouth bass world record swimming in California? And they said no.
Interesting.
And that shocked me because for almost 50 years, California's bass fisheries have kind of made hay off the fact that was where the next world record was going to come from. And we saw Dottie, and we saw Giants by Bob Krupe and Dan Cadota and Mike Arujo, and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of stuff has stuck with me. So, you know, we all thought, okay, California is going to produce this next giant fish. You know, George Caniglio knocked on the door in about 2006 with a fish that was almost 20. But what I found out is that a lot of these cities and counties that manage these waters in California that have traditionally produced these giant bass, they have stopped the trout stocking, either for financial reasons or because they were getting heat from environmental groups. And when you stop the trout stockings, you stop the tremendous growth. Bill Siementel calls trout vitamin T, which I think is a cool thing.
I like that.
Shout out to Bill for vitamin T.
Yeah.
No vitamin T. You know, I believe Hodges is the only lake in California that has ever produced a 20-pound bass and not had trout in it. You guys are asking me to go off the top of my head, but I think I'm right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Is it truly $1 million fish, Ken, if somebody was to break the record?
Yeah, but it's not like it was 20 years ago, Mark. Back
Yeah.
then, the Big Bass Record Club out of Tampa, Florida, and a guy named Mickey Owens and Doug Hannon, the late great Doug Hannon, they were overseeing this Big Bass Record Club, and they had at one point a $5 million bounty on the fish, and they raised it to $8 million. They had to eliminate their bounty because the insurance policy on it with, I believe, Lloyd's of London was just becoming too expensive in comparison to the revenues they raised through memberships. But, if you caught a world record bass at that point and you handed over the live fish to them, you were going to get $8 million. It ain't worth that, but I think it's worth $1 million. And I say it's worth $1 million. We talked about this a little bit last time too. Kurita screwed up. Manabu Kurita, in my opinion, has the world record for largemouth bass at 22.5 out of Lake Biwa in Japan. His fish is legit. I have more than doubts about George Perry. Kurita did everything wrong, though, if you want to make a buck. He caught the fish in Japan, not in the United States. He didn't speak English. He caught it on live bait. He used tackle that was not available in the U.S. All of these things worked to undercut the value of his record. Anybody who plans to catch the record, call me. I'll tell you exactly what to use, where to go, all that good stuff to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But you need to sell your story. You need to try to keep the fish alive if you possibly can, because that fish is worth a great deal of money to tour with. You gotta keep it under wraps what you caught that fish on initially. I'm not saying you should ever lie, but you can withhold information until you perhaps strike a deal with the tackle companies involved. If the rod company doesn't want to play ball with you, ain't no reason to mention them. Same for the reel.
Yeah.
But the bounties on the record seem to have all but disappeared. BASS had $100,000 bounty on the fish for any member for many years, and at various times over the last 40 years, Berkeley, TTI Blakemore, Creek Chub, on and on and on, have all had bounties on the world record largemouth.
Yeah.
You don't hear about them anymore.
Yep. All right, man. We had a question come in via email from a viewer that I forwarded to you. Let's get into that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. This is only, Mark. I noticed that Mark said yesterday he had forwarded me a bunch of questions. No, he forwarded me one question.
Yeah.
But I'm loaded for bear on it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was ready to talk about it off the top of my head, but I actually did a little bit of prep work this time because, it's Mark Jeffries and he demands such things.
No, that's not true. I actually did send you a couple more, but I did it from my classroom, and I've been having some issues with the email in there. So those folks, I apologize. I will make sure that Ken gets the question, because this will not obviously be the last time that Ken's on here. He's going to be on here all the time. So keep going, man.
Okay, now this email, I love this because, I've talked about this and written about this different times, but this email comes from Ernie Williams, who lives in Northern California, and he's curious about a tournament that Dave Glebe won decades ago. Ernie says that his dad tells him about this event from time to time, and he was wondering about it, and also about Dave Glebe and Roland Martin in this tournament. And I want to tell you guys all about it. First of all, this was a tournament put on by the American Bass Fisherman Organization. They started in Florida in 73 or 74. This patch is vintage. This patch is probably dates to about the time of the tournament, which was January 1977. I was a member of this organization, Mark Jeffries.
Wow.
And, yeah. And this is an actual patch from way back in the day. They lasted from about 73, 74 to maybe 79. And And this organization, the National Bassman, other organizations like that, they were competing head to head with BASS back in the day. Ray Scott got it all started, but Ray had a lot of competition early on. Ray did it better. Ray did it smarter. Ray was an amazing personality, is an amazing personality, so he was successful, and these others fell by the wayside. But in the mid 70s, the American Bass Fisherman Organization was putting on tournaments just like BASS. They had a magazine just like BASS. They used the same writers as BASS. They had the same guys fishing the tournaments as BASS. And they would try to compete for the top pros, maybe by offering a better payout, by paying more places, things like that. But unfortunately, a lot of these other organizations were plagued by cheating scandals or financial fraud and things like that, and were ultimately driven out of business. Some were driven out of business just because they couldn't find meaningful traction. Now, the tournament that Ernie's interested in was a tournament on Okeechobee here in Florida on January 26, 27, and 28 of 1977. Okay, so let's harken back. What is that? Oh my God, it's 44 years, Mark? Wow.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Long time ago. 44 years ago. This is a tournament on Okeechobee. There were 155 anglers in this tournament, including all the guys, basically all the guys you would know from back then, but most notably Roland Martin and Dave Glebe, one of the early flippers. D. Thomas started flipping back in the 60s and 70s. His first protege, even before Gary Klein, was Dave Glebe of Stockton, California. And as I recall it, D. Thomas was a big believer in the long rod, which at the time was about 8 feet. And Glebe still thought you could do it with a short rod, which in the day was 5.5. Ultimately, Glebe came around and started using a longer rod, but that was in the earlier days of flipping. So Glebe is a protege of D. Thomas, who has already won a BASS event on Bull Shoals in 1975. But D. Thomas didn't want to give up his job in the grocery industry, so he goes back to California, doesn't fish the tour anymore, and Dave Glebe goes out to give it a shot. January 77 on Okeechobee, there's 155 guys in this tournament. They've all paid $250 to enter. Okay. And Mark, you and I remember these days. This was pro on pro.
Right. Okay?
There are no co-anglers back then.
Flip a coin.
Yeah.
You
basically flip a coin for whose boat you take. Although there were some unwritten rules about things, like if Mark's in first place and I'm in 177th, we're going to take Mark's boat, go to his fish, probably.
Right.
But I could force the issue and demand a coin flip. But for the most part, there were some protocols and unwritten rules. There's an 8 bass daily limit back then. This is 77. At that point, BASS had gone to a 7 fish limit, I think. Maybe it was still 10, but it was probably 7 for the most part at that point. And anyway, these guys are launching on Okeechobee. Day one is cold. Things could not have shaped up better for the lone flipper in the field. Can you imagine a time? Can you imagine a time when there was one guy in a tournament field who had a flipping stick?
No.
It happened at Bull Shoals in 1975 when it was D. Thomas, but it was still happening at this point because D won one tournament and then he kind of faded into the background. By 77, Glebe's the only guy with a flipping stick in the field, and he's doing good, but he's just starting to get noticed. It's hard to believe this on Okeechobee, but because Okeechobee is extremely South Florida. Day one dawns and it's 35 degrees. A cold front is just whipped through the place and it's shut down whatever patterns were going on. Florida bass do not like cold fronts. And in particular, They don't like cold front snow Okeechobee, where they rarely see significant ones. So it's 35 degrees, and everybody's hurting for it. Glebe takes the day one lead. I don't know what he caught because that's not been published anywhere that I can find. But he takes the day one lead by 4 ounces. And they launch on day 2, and things are warming up, but it's still pretty cold. He catches him again on day 2, and now he leads by 22 pounds.
Oh, jeez.
That's how much better he was on day 2. He goes from a 4-ounce lead to a 22-pound lead. What he's doing is he's got his flippin' stick, and this is the first production flippin' stick made by Fenwick. It's 7 feet 4 inches long. It's a single-piece rod. A lot of people think the first Fenwick flippin' stick was a 7.6 telescopic rod. Yeah. I have one. I didn't bring it in here. I should have brought it in. It's in the garage. But the first one was actually a 7.4 one-piece rod. And if you got one of those, you got something. It's probably worth a couple $100 at least if it's in decent shape. And he is fishing with a 5/8 ounce black hair jig with a short piece of plastic worm as the trailer. I'm not sure what kind of worm it was, but I think it was a jelly worm. So you got a black hair jig and a black jelly worm as a trailer, and it's 5/8. Because keep in mind, they probably didn't make many bass jigs heavier than about 5/8 back then. You know, we're used to seeing all these things ounce and a half, whatever we want.
Yeah. Back
then, not so common. And he's probably got 25-pound. He's certainly got monofilament, but he's probably got 25-pound monofilament spooled onto his Ambassador 5000D. I should have brought my 5000D in here. 5000D is a green reel. It's the Ambassador that's green, and the D stands for direct drive. It had no drag.
Huh.
If you cranked the reel, whatever was on the other end either came to you or you broke your line. And
interesting.
Because of Dave Glebe and D. Thomas, I had to have a Fenwick flipping stick and a 5000D, and I did because I was just that eaten up with it. So day 3, Glebe's got a 22-pound lead going into day 3, and he whacks him again. And he winds up winning the tournament with 95 pounds, 3 ounces. That's his total. 24 bass, 95.3. He wins by 42 pounds, 9 ounces. 42.9. He doesn't need to launch on the last day. He can stay home. He can stay home. And you can count on one hand the number of times a guy could stay home on the last day. And this is one of those times. He wins by 42 pounds, 9 ounces. Second place, Ernie, and your dad was right on this. Second place is Roland Martin. Now, Roland's got 52 pounds, 10 ounces. And the reason he has 52 pounds, 10 ounces is not simply because Roland Martin was the greatest angler of that era. It's because Roland drew Dave Glebe on day 1 and got a lesson in flipping.
Wow.
Without that lesson in flipping, I don't know, maybe Roland still finishes in second place, but perhaps not. And his history with the flipping stick is very different because remember, just a few years later in 81, fall of 80, spring of 81, Roland wins 3 national tournaments in a row with a flipping stick. And this was his introduction to the technique.
Wow.
Some other famous guys who were in that tournament, Paul Elias fished that tournament, Guy Aker fished that tournament. They finished well back, but Roland was there and did finish second. Now,
what about Bill Dance? Did he fish in that?
Bill, if Bill was in there, he wasn't in the top 50. I can only say that.
Did Jimmy fish in it?
Not in the top 50.
Okay. All right.
I can only tell you the guys who are in the top 50, and the geeky, crazy people like Mark and myself would recognize a lot of names, but for the guys who are a little bit newer to the sport, the names you might recognize are Paul Elias and Guy Aker. They both finished top 50. They only published the top 50 finishers. So, okay, now I mentioned Roland winning 3 tournaments in a row with a flipping stick in 80 and 81. This kicked off a string of 3 wins in a row for Glebe that a lot of people don't know about. And the reason they don't know about it was because Glebe did it on 3 different circuits. Okay? Roland won all his 3 in a row on the BASS circuit. Years later, Charlie Ingram would win 3 in a row in the mid-'80s on a couple of different circuits. But Glebe did it first in January 77 with the American Bass Fisherman Group. And then in February, he won with the American Angler Organization on Rayburn. And then he won with BASS in February at Toledo Bend. And get this, his bait every time is a 5/8 ounce black hair jig. A plastic one trailer. That's his bait, you know.
Wow.
What he's doing, because the hyacinths are fairly dense, but they'll occasionally have little areas where a bait can get through, is he's truly flipping, which is a fixed line technique rather than pitching, which is involving the reel to rotate and let line out. Flipping is where the reel is engaged. You're pulling the line off like this. You're swinging it like a pendulum and releasing the line back to the rod gradually as the bait approaches the water. And I mention that because it may be that Mark and I are the only 2 guys here old enough to remember true flipping.
Yes.
But it's amazing how we still use the word flipping when 99.9999% of the time guys are pitching. Okay. And although we generally credit D. Thomas for developing the technique of flipping, it's tough to say who developed the technique of pitching. I found a paragraph in James Henshall's 1881 Book of the Black Bass, which leads me to believe that he was pitching in 1881. But pitching as we know it today is more likely to be traced back to Tommy Biffle in the early 80s or mid-80s. Okay, sorry to keep going off on
that's good stuff, man. That's history right there.
One of the things that I want to talk about, because you know we look at big margins of victory, Mark, and we look at 42-9 by Glebe, which is about as big as I can find. But let's put it in some other perspective too. We saw Patrick Walters absolutely whip up on everybody at Lake Fork last year in the Elite Series. He won by 29 pounds, 10 ounces. Well, that was the biggest beatdown in Elite history by a fair margin. He was 39% better than second place. When Rick Clunn won the 84 Classic on the Arkansas River, catching the heaviest weight all 3 days of competition and winning by 25.5 pounds, the single greatest performance in Classic history, in my opinion. He won by 51%. He was 51% better than second place. Now let's look at Glebe, 1977 on Okeechobee. He was 81% better than second place. That's what puts it in perspective for me.
Wow.
When you're 81% better than the next guy, you have put a beat down on him.
Wow. Do you have one of those jigs by chance? Not that we can see. I just wonder if you have one of those in your collection.
I don't, and I would expect that it was hand-tied by Glebe.
Okay.
Who is one of the more interesting characters in our sport.
Wow, that's good. That's good stuff, man.
Well, cool. Ernie, I hope I answered your question. Maybe you can shoot Mark a message on the instant feedback or something if I missed something.
Yeah.
But but I try to dig pretty deep on it there and go into some detail. Maybe fill in some blanks that your dad had when you were listening to your stories from him.
All right, a couple more questions here, and then we got to take a break, and then we will come back and dive into a couple more questions here. All right, from Benjamin. Hey, Mark, can you ask Ken about how much high school and college bass fishing plays a part when a person goes pro?
Are we going to handle that now?
Yeah.
How about 0?
No, come on, Ken.
Okay,
Seriously?
Okay. All right, I'll give it a little bit. Here's what I'll say about high school and college fishing and how it plays a role in a guy going pro. It might give a young angler an opportunity to work with sponsors and develop some relationships in the industry. But that's speculative and even doubtful. I don't think it plays any particularly meaningful role. I talk to a lot of guys who will ask me, hey, what should I do to take the next level and work my way into being a pro? And you'll hear a lot of guys, including some pro anglers who may know better than me, but I have a different opinion, who will tell them, go fish your club level and then fish some local regional levels and then work your way up. But I don't think professional fishing is a ladder per se. I think professional fishing is a mountain. And I think whether you get to the top by climbing every inch of the way, slogging through, crawling, clawing, or whether you take a helicopter is largely up to you. I would recommend that guys fish the highest level of competition that they can financially afford. I think there's value in all of it. I think there's value in fishing club tournaments. I think there's value in fishing college. I think there's value in fishing small regional tournaments. But if you fish the highest level you can afford, you have an opportunity to break through, and you're going to see a lot more good anglers at that level than you will at these lower levels.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on this subject too, but I think the big difference is, remember, the college game, you're fishing as a team.
That's another great point. Yeah.
Yeah. You're fishing as a team, and the level of competition that you're going up against from a college standpoint, that if the natural progression would be to go to college to the pros, I think it is amazing that we have some anglers out there that have had enormous amount of success that came from the college ranks, because it's a different game, Ken. It truly is. It is a different game, but there are characteristics of the college game that you can take with you that will help you progress toward your goal of becoming the most overused term in this game, which is, I'm a pro fisherman.
Yes. I love your perspective, Mark. You always look at things from a different and often better perspective than me. Where do you see those? Where do the skills translate in your way of thinking?
Well, think about it. Every single guy that we have probably talked to the last 30 years always says one thing: time on the water. Time on the water.
Absolutely.
All right? This is a great way. The college programs are a great way to get that time on the water. But as you and I know, there are so many elements to being a touring professional, not a so-called professional, but being a touring professional. There are so many other things that take place both on and off the water that's why I find it amazing that some of these guys have just went lights out after the college game. It's a totally different game, but you do get time on the water. You do get competition. And you know what, Ken? Most importantly, I hope every single one of those college anglers are getting their degree. That's the most important thing about collegiate angling.
Because you're going to need it. You're probably
you
not
are. No matter what, you're going to need it. Okay.
You make a great point, and I'm with you on that. It does give you some time on the water, perhaps. It gives you what I would call appointment fishing. It also gives you an opportunity to fish a variety of other bodies of water. And, if you only fish around home, your path is much tougher. So getting to fish these other bodies of water is very important. But to the time on the water thing, I would say, it forces you to get out of your comfort zone and fish some other bodies of water, but you can do that anyway if you're really disciplined and you make the effort. There's nothing stopping you from hitching up the boat and driving 100 miles to fish a different lake. The tournament opportunity just forces you to maybe be more diligent about it, take it a little more seriously, hitch up even if it's raining or snowing or 1,000 degrees.
Yeah, I think the social aspect that takes place during somebody's college experience, I think it is a big help from getting that degree in the socialization of being a part of a fishing team. All right, both from a fishing standpoint and from an educational standpoint. I know being involved with, the baseball team that I was involved with, the fraternity that I was involved with when I went to college, it actually helped me out and motivated me in other aspects to get my degree, because I knew what awaited me after I graduated, and I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to do once I graduated. But at the same time, I would love to see what the percentage is, Ken, of the number of collegiate anglers that truly do go on to try and fish in what I would classify the minor leagues. In other words, you're not going to have guys that go straight from college to the Elite Series or the BPT or the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit. All right? They're going to have to work their way up. Okay, if you have 1,000 collegiate anglers out there, I don't even know what the number is. I would love to know what that number is. Is it 1,000? Is it 300? I don't know. I know there's a lot of schools out there.
It's so poorly organized. It's
there's three elements of it. There's Wade Middleton's, there's Bass's element, and then there's the MLF FLW element. It's very fragmented, but here's the deal: they all fish all three. They all dip their toes in all the pools.
I'll say this: I think that because of the team element, I think an angler who's really serious about becoming a professional angler would be better off by joining bass clubs in a couple of areas near his home so that he can fish a wider variety of waters throughout the year, or just simply be diligent enough to fish those other bodies of water. I don't think the college experience, I know my opinion differs from yours, but I think the college experience could be improved upon by a diligent angler who wants to get out there and do it on his own and is willing to make those kind of sacrifices.
I'm reading the comments, man. They're quite interesting. It says so many people should have got a degree, and so many of us have too many degrees. 10 years of education and $200,000 later, and I still don't have a bass boat.
I feel your pain, my brother. My 2 degrees, and I'm old and broken down. I fish out of my 16-foot aluminum panfish style boat with stick steering. Love it.
I think the college game is great. I think it's a great part of that collegiate experience if that's what you want to do. But I don't think it is a necessary step that if you truly want to become a professional. Makes sense?
Right. I think thanks to people like yourself, Mark, there are a lot of great outlets out there that are helping and advancing the collegiate angler. I just don't know if that's the route I would take. Ultimately, breaking into this sport on the highest professional level is mostly about sacrifice rather than following a particular path. If you're willing to make the sacrifice, you got a shot. If you're not willing to make the sacrifices, you're not going to get there. And it's a tough career choice,
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go commercial free today, folks. All right, I'm not going to run commercials, but what I do ask is that you continue to support the companies and the products that make BTL possible. I don't know if a lot of people realize out there, we're doing a ton of shows and we've really grown. Our audience has grown. But at the same time, folks, we're one of the few entities out there. This is our job, Ken. This is what we do. This is our full-time gig. Yeah, I teach part-time and coach basketball and bowl and do all this other stuff. But this is our primary source of income that we support our families and everything else that we have going on. So we're going to go commercial-free, but I think that's important to point out, folks, that it is very, very important, and we are asking you to continue to support the sponsors that make BTL happen. So when you see the intro, all those companies, so important to the continued success and the continued increase in shows that we're going to showcase here in 2021. So we're not going to go with a commercial break this time. We're going to keep going with Ken. All right, very interesting question here, Ken. Who was it? Let's see here. Man, I can't see it. Yeah. Hey, hang on. Let's see. Over the years, for the Bassmaster Classic, what, in your opinion, has been the most impactful lure as a result of the Bassmaster Classic? Oh, that was Errol that asked that.
Who asked that?
Errol. Duckett.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Errol, how are you, man?
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing it at iCast or somewhere. That's an interesting question. And to answer that question, I think I've got to talk a little bit about the Classic and when it is fished. When the Classic started in 1971, it was a fall event. These things were fished in October and even in November. And so a certain style of bait prevailed at that time. You saw a lot of spinnerbaits do well. You saw some crankbaits do well. You even saw some worms do well. Then in why am I drawing a blank on this? In the early 80s, it became a summertime tournament. Okay. And it was more a plastic worm deal. And that became a bigger factor. And now you've got the tournament, in the late winter or very, very early spring. And so you've got a lot more jigs and things like that being a factor in the tournament. Errol, I can tell you this, because I've studied it and made a big deal about it in my life and research and stuff. The lure type that is factored in most Classic wins has been the diving crankbait. Of the 51 classics out there, the winner has credited a diving type crankbait with part of his catch 24 times. And a plastic worm is second with 18. Spinnerbait's also at 18. A jig is at 13. And everything else is well below 10. So, but it's not just, if the Classic had been about the same time every year, we'd really see some dramatic differences. But because the Classic had been moved around and fished in truly 4 seasons now, it's all over the place.
All right, I'll throw my 2 cents in on this, and it's only because I was kind of close to it, and I saw what happened to the company after this person won the Bassmaster Classic. Any idea what I'm talking about, Ken, or who I'm talking about? Has an Oklahoma tie.
An Oklahoma tie?
Yeah.
Are you talking about Andes?
No, I'm talking about Ken Cook and
Ken
the
Cook
heart and the heart spinnerbait.
Right.
That had a massive impact on that company, and really that entire brand exploded because of what Ken did.
Yeah, absolutely. When Ken won the 91 Classic at Chesapeake Bay, probably not a lot of people had heard of the Heartthrob spinnerbait going into that event. But it certainly became well known after that. And, I think the Classic has had a lot of value for a lot of different companies and brands through the years. And I think that value has probably declined through the years as anglers become more educated. As people like Mark Jeffries and Bass Zone educate anglers, they realize there are no secret weapons anymore. It's all just good fundamentals and finding fish and so forth. But back in the day, 30, 40, 50 years ago, if a guy won a Classic on a bait, you had to have it. And as soon as you got it, you threw it, even though it was 6 months later. But it's there have been. But there's a Classic boost to every lure that's part of a Classic win. And Errol, when your brother won in 2007, I know it did great things for the rattle trap and the chigger craw.
Yeah, that it did. His shoes are right there. Where are they at? Right there.
Oh, man, you got his shoes?
I've got his Adidas shoes. The red shoes, man.
I took here's my Boyd after the Classic story. I got to go out with Boyd and bass photographer Gerald Crawford the day after Boyd won that Classic. And I knew Boyd a little bit before then, but we got to spend an hour in the car going down. And I really enjoyed the time I got to spend with Boyd and just getting to know him a little bit. I've certainly gotten to know him more through the years and think very highly of him. He's so bright and so personable. But at the end of our photo shoot, we had put his boat back on the trailer, and I thought, man, there's a shot I want to get involving the shoes. So I had him stretched out on the deck with his back against the windshield and the console and the trophy sitting there. And I got the widest angle lens I had, and I backed off to the shoes and shot it, and it ran as a 2-page spread in Bassmaster. And I'm probably just about as proud of that photograph as any I've taken. That was a fun one.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. Very, very cool. I thought we were going to check in with Matt, but I tried calling him and couldn't get a hold of him. So
when
it's
you talk to
unfortunate.
Matt, tell him I'm hoping to take him to dinner when he's here, and he is.
Yeah,
he's slated for a tour of the Bass office.
Yeah,
Museum.
he's been a little spun out, but we'll see. He was catching them a little bit. Last time I spoke with him, he was catching them a little bit. But, he says he's not going to have butterflies. He's fished the opens before. But when you're taking this big step and you're fishing all 9, there's going to be a little bit of butterflies. I don't care who you are.
Yeah. It's a tough road, but he's an outstanding angler. I think he's going to do well. It's if he can get off to a solid start, that's going to be huge. It's difficult to bounce back from a bad first tournament.
Yeah,
in terms of the season performance.
All right, Matt in Alabama's got a really good question on the instant feedback. Outside the fishing industry, we're seeing a lot of direct sale. The influence of Amazon and everything else that's taking place from an e-com standpoint. Are we going to see that migrating to the fishing industry, Ken?
Absolutely. Only a question of time. Only a question of when outlets like Amazon decide that the fishing industry is big enough and strong enough to support that kind of effort. I can tell you that it was a couple of years ago that, for the first time, I believe, folks from Amazon showed up at the American Sport Fishing Association Summit, and people took notice of that. There are already some products available on Amazon, as you know, but I haven't checked it recently. I haven't searched spinning rod on Amazon recently, but there was a time that if you entered a common bass lure term, the first stuff that popped up would be no-name stuff out of who knows where. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of not the kind of stuff you'd want to buy and use. It would be lower quality stuff perhaps, but that's changing. And there are already some top-notch brands available on Amazon, and that's only going to increase.
All right, I'm looking.
There ain't no coming back from Amazon.
Yeah. What's the scoop on iCast, Ken?
We're going to have an in-person iCast, Mark. We're absolutely
nice.
Going to be in Orlando, Florida. I was talking to trade show VP Blake Swango just last Friday, I think it was. And we're very confident this is going to happen. It's going to happen with the Orange County and Florida protocols, So if things like masks are required, there are going to be masks. If things like, distancing are going to be required, then they're going to find ways to make that work as well. But we're going to have an in-person iCast, and I'm really, really looking forward to it because I think the industry needs it.
Here yesterday, I think it was yesterday, they made the announcement in Texas. They're opening things up in Texas, so it sounds like that there's going to be an expo. What's been the feedback that you've heard in the industry with some of the manufacturers and retail outlets?
I think it's cautious optimism. That's a phrase that gets thrown around way too often, isn't it? We're cautiously optimistic. I think cautiously optimistic is another way of saying pessimistic. But anyway, no, I think people are legitimately cautiously optimistic that these things are going to happen and that we're going to have a meaningful expo. If there's an expo, I'm going because my work demands that I be at something like that. I would hate to miss one. I love the Bassmaster Classic. What a great event. And I'm very hopeful that significant numbers of people will have the vaccine by then, that we'll have achieved some level of herd immunity or whatever's possible by then. I don't like it, but I'll wear a mask. I'll do whatever I have to do to get in that crowd and enjoy what's going on. Who knows?
Very nice. All right. Last thing, I saw this story in the Wall Street Journal. I believe it was Monday. And a lot of people out there, obviously, they know I talk about bowling, and we've had Chris Prather on, and the whole comparison between bowling and fishing is discussed on this show. But something very interesting, Ken. CBS is going to be doing a pilot on a gentleman named Tom Smallwood, who is a PBA Tour guy that has 3 titles. Okay. His story is not unique from the aspect of what some of the guys over the years on the professional fishing tours have done. He was a automotive assembly line worker that got laid off, didn't really have any other skills, and decided that he was going to go out on tour and be a professional bowler, and then he ended up making it, all right, as a result of him being laid off. Well, CBS has decided to do a couple of pilot episodes on the story of Tom Smallwood. So it got me thinking, all right, because I think fishing is a much, much better example of some of those situations that have taken place over the years where, there is a situation where somebody has lost their job or they just don't want to do anything. They can't do anything other than try and become a professional angler. The amount of exposure that if CBS does pick up this series after their pilot and the way that a pilot works, you have a group of people look at it, and if they go, oh, yeah, that was cool, that was interesting, or no, that's a POS, I don't know why you would spend the money on that, I was disinterested, I have no desire to ever watch anything like that again. You get a feel for it. Is that something that would be viable that a network might pick up and do a pilot on in the professional bass fishing world? And if they did, off the top of your head, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, who would be a great example of somebody who basically was going through massive adversity and then went out on tour and had an enormous amount of success? What are your thoughts?
Well, let me talk about a candidate first. The first guy who comes to mind when you were describing this Tom Smallwood, who I'm not familiar with, who had a comparable story, I think, is Ott Defo. Ott was laid off from his job he was working at a mill in Tennessee, and he was laid off from his job, and bass fishing is what he loves and what he's good at. And look at what Ott has done. He's been phenomenally successful. He's a great human being. He's a wonderful personality. I love Ott Defoe. He's a great guy. Now, don't tell him I said that, because I like to give Ott a hard time, and I'll tell my Ott story later if you want. But he would be a candidate for something like that. He's got a great family too.
Yeah.
You know, Jenny and their 3 kids, just a great family. Is it viable for the fishing world? I think it's probably about as viable as for bowling.
Yeah.
I think bowling is going to be a challenge too, though. Here's the problem, I think. And I don't mean to be looking at it from a weird perspective, but maybe that's the only perspective I ever have. Bowling is a huge sport. Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people go bowling every year. Fishing is a huge sport. Millions and millions and millions of people go fishing every year. But most of them go one time. And the bowlers don't consider themselves, when they say, "Hey, who are you?" Their first thought is not, "Oh, I'm a bowler."
Yeah.
And the same thing is true for fishing. So if you're hoping to catch part of your audience because you got a bowler or because you got an angler, I think you've lost already. I think you're already in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
So now what you've got to do is you've got to capture your audience quickly on the basis of who this person is, what this person has gone through, what their trials and tribulations are, and what makes them compelling. And then what bothers me is the narrative arc. Wow, I'm going off I'm in the tall grass now, buddy. I'm in the tall grass now. Now you've got a narrative arc problem, because you're not following a guy from hardship to success. You're following a guy from success and then looking back to hardship, which is not a very compelling story at all.
Yeah. People like the crash and burn, Ken.
Well, people like crash and burn, but people also like happy endings. People also like to see the guy who struggles and then prevails. You're not giving them that with Tom Smallwood, and you wouldn't be giving them that with Ott Defoe. Much as I love Ott, and much as I think he'd make a great story, it's tough to find that audience. So I fear they have audience traction challenges ahead.
Yeah, we'll see. Who would have thought that a comedy series would be about a guy that delivers packages? You know, a UPS driver. So
there you go. I don't watch enough TV to even keep up with what's successful these days.
Yeah.
But my wife is in charge of the TV.
We shall see on that. I found that very, very, very interesting. All right, man. A couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap things up. I have a personal question. I'm being greedy here. Do you think we will ever see a Bassmaster Classic at Lake Mead, back where it originally started?
Well, I was going to say, Mark, we already have. But 1971, the first Classic was on Mead. Bobby Murray, of course, wins.
I didn't mean to stump you, man.
Well, you're not stumping me. You're forcing me to
think.
To think.
I mean, I know there's a lot of logistics. I know there's a lot of logistics that would have to take place because of location and all that. But I just think the nostalgia and everything else that goes along with that event, and I really had a feeling that they might try and pull it off for the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, and that's when they should have done it if they were going to do it at all.
Yeah.
But here's why I think they're not going to do it. A, they didn't do it on the 50th anniversary, and nobody who's around for the 50th is going to be around for the 100th. So I'm going to bet against. The second thing is, when you think about where you're going to put a big tournament like that, that's a big financial ask from the community. Bass wants a fairly high dollar amount. Let's say 500,000 plus. They probably ask for $1 million or more, but let's say 500,000 plus for that. Third thing is the community's got to want it, and I don't think Las Vegas cares anything about a Bassmaster Classic. they look at Bassmaster Classic and they have no idea what it is. They're not interested in it. It's not going to bring in a significant revenue for them. They have bigger problems right now, and the Bassmaster Classic would not fix them. So no, it's the same reason I think it's tough to have another Orlando Classic, though you could perhaps have a Kissimmee, Florida Classic, which is a smaller town just outside of Orlando.
Yeah.
The town's got to want it, and part of that means the town's got to need it.
All right, interesting question from Brian. Let me show it up here. Does Ken ever see the Elite Series going to either Canada or Mexico?
No. I'm saying no to Canada because of unless you count launching in New York or someplace and fishing in Canadian waters, I'm going to say no. It's logistically a challenge. You're going to have all kind of passport issues, all kind of work visa issues, all kind of stuff like that. You have potentially safety issues in some places. That's an awfully long trek if you're going to go to Mexico. And again, I'm not counting Falcon or Amistad, where you're launching in Texas, but you're perhaps fishing Mexico waters. I think there's just too much. Plus, think about the bad publicity, Brian. Don't we have good enough bass waters in America? Sorry, Brian.
Man.
Sorry to shut you down, brother.
Interesting.
It's my job to come up with weird takes, right? Is that why you're doing the own work?
Although what is it called? Is this correct? The Canadian Open that they have every year that Charlie Hartley won.
Bernie Schultz won one also back in the day. Yeah. Some American guys certainly go and fish that, especially the guys who are good up there and the guys who live close up there. But that's very different, obviously, from having an Elite Series event there.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Several questions about the quantity of product that is in retail outlets and everything like that. Can you give us any updates or insight on that, Ken?
Well, I certainly thought we would not be having problems at this time, but I've obviously been wrong. We still have a lot of issues, and I'm not sure when that's going to change. I think that COVID has been far more disruptive than I at first anticipated or realized. A lot of products that would be new for this year didn't really get launched or introduced last year. And so a lot of production is behind because of that. That's not to say that there are no new products out for 2021. There are, but it's not the same volume that we've seen in years past. And the disruptions to production, we think about China initially as having been a major disruption in production, but it's been more than that. It's really been a disruption in production at every major production center in the world, whether it's Southeast Asia or China or South America, Mexico, even the U.S. There were severe production disruptions that have created a ripple effect that continues to this day. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Absolutely. Maybe it's not shining as bright as I had hoped, and maybe it's not getting here as fast. But I'm gonna be somewhat optimistic here and say that we will be back to relative normal in time for the summer. June, let's say. To be otherwise would be just another hit to manufacturers who, by and large, most of them have not suffered too much through COVID because they were able to sell out of what they had. And retailers, by and large, have done well, at least in the States and so forth, that they've been able to remain open. But every day that this situation lasts is something of a surprise and quite a disappointment to me.
Yeah. Hey, I just thought of something real quick. Is the Bass Pro Shops Sportsman Warehouse deal going to go through? Because I recall they were having some what's the right term, Ken?
Fair trade type issues.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it will, but I don't know. I'm just not sure. That's a I practiced law for a while, but I don't do trade. And I don't know enough about that stuff and antitrust stuff and stuff like that. But I would expect that whatever the hitches are in making that deal go through, that they will find a way to smooth them out, because obviously both sides of that deal want that to happen very much. And we have multiple parties like that. They will find a way.
All right, kind of a random question here. We're going to end on this, and we could do an entire show again with you on this subject, but I want to get your take on this real quick. Let's say I'm at a Bass Pro Shops in, let me see here, somewhere in the DFW Metroplex, and there's a 25-year-old guy wearing wearing a big buy hat or whatever. All right, he's just wearing a hat, sitting there, and he's looking at jerk baits in the jerk bait aisle. If I was to walk up to him and say, "Hey man, how you doing today?" Doing good, yeah. Hey, can I ask you a question? Sure. Do you know who Kevin Van Dam is? What do you think that guy's going to say?
He's wearing a big bite.
I don't know. He's just wearing a hat, dude. I just threw that out there.
The odds are very good, in my opinion. The odds are better than 50%. He's familiar with Kevin Van Dam.
All right.
But that's different, because we talked about this last time I was on, and we were speaking specifically about a survey that a major manufacturer had done of the Classic Expo crowd. And I think what I was telling you at the time was the most recognized angler among people physically in the Bassmaster Expo, the most recognized angler was Bill Dance. He was at about 80%.
Right.
You drop down to 50%, you start to pick up Hank Parker, Jimmy Houston, then you get to Roland Martin. At about 25%, 1 in 4 attendees at the Classic Expo know who Kevin Van Dam is or recognize that he is an angler.
Mm-hmm.
Then you drop way down from there into the low teens or 10% area, and you start to pick up the other guys we think of as giant stars in the industry. And this survey was done 2019 after Jordan Lee was coming off 2 consecutive Classic wins, and he came in at just under 2%. So, but now you're asking me a different question.
Yeah.
Classic Expo is where people go because it's in town. It's free. Ain't nothing going on. A lot of those people are only moderately interested in fishing. I think a guy who's in a Bass Pro Shops, especially if he's wearing a bass fishing related cap, he's probably there to buy something. And there's a significant chance he's there to buy something related to the fishing industry. And if he's familiar with Bass Pro Shops, maybe he's seen a lot of their advertising, which often features Kevin Van Dam. So I'm going to put KVD at the 50% plus on that.
All right. Final question on the KVD thing. We got into a huge discussion on whether or not in this day and age, the current condition of what's taking place in the fishing industry and the tournament fishing industry, is Kevin Van Dam still relevant?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What? First thing I would say to you is, when you're the GOAT, when you're the greatest of all time, you're always relevant, whether you're competing or not competing. Second of all, I still think Kevin has quite a bit of gas left in the tank if he chooses to use it. And by that I mean, I don't expect Kevin to stay in the game at a competitive level for as long as someone like a Guy Aker or a Rick Clunn or somebody like that. I think Kevin will step away well before that age. But I think he's got plenty of gas left in the tank. I think he's still a real talent. And the other thing that makes him relevant and keeps him relevant is that the guys who we see rising up and becoming the stars of today, as we call them, whether we're talking Jordan Lee or Jacob Wheeler or somebody in that 20 to 30 age range, they are standing on Kevin Van Dam's shoulders. And they learned a lot of what they know from Kevin Van Dam. So that keeps him relevant too.
Agree 100%, man. All right. We have went 90 minutes uninterrupted, Ken. And I could probably go another 90 and then another 90. So just a fantastic show. Can't thank you enough for sitting in for Matt. And we're definitely going to bring you on board, dude. We want to keep this thing going with you. And I know the fans do also.
Well, that's very kind. And for those of you who put up with another 90 minutes of me, thank you. I thank each of you individually, but that's not possible right now. But Mark, always a pleasure, my brother. You have no idea how much I enjoy doing the show with you.
Yeah, well, like I said, man, you're going to be a part of what we want to do now and in the future here on BTL. And the fans, they love them some Ken Duke, man. That was a great, great story. And folks, do this. Definitely want to do the Smallmouth show with you, Ken. And if anybody out there has any topical subject matter that you would like Ken to do a show on, email me, mark@bassone.com, and we'll see if we can make that happen. Sound good, Ken?
I love it, man. You're giving me an excuse to talk about the things that you and I are so passionate about.
All right. Very cool. All right, folks, tomorrow, Day 4 with Frank Scalish live from Lake Norman. I don't know if he's going to be on the water or in the house that he's staying at, but we shall see. Hopefully he's going to be on the water and see if he's been catching some of those big, fat, spotted bass on Lake Norman.
Tear him up, Frank.
All right. Ken, be safe, man, and we wish your mother well. Hopefully she will be doing much better and come out of surgery with flying colors there, and our thoughts are with you and your family, and good luck with that, man.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
All right, that's it. Tomorrow, same time, folks. That's it. We're out of here.